I believe that the best point for us to start is discussing the current situation of the US educational system. So, Luis, could you please share the key statistics on the MLEs in the US school system?
Yes, so I brought some statistics here for us. I would like to share that according to the National Center for Education Statistics, the percentage of public school students identify as MLEs is 10.6%. And this was the number in 2021. So that equals to 5.3 million students. But it is important to know that since 2021, which is the latest statistics that we have, that name has increased and it continues to increase every day.
Is the population, the growing population of MLEs spread evenly across the country, or are there differences between states?
Yes, the population is not spread evenly throughout the states. So we have some states like, for example, Texas. Texas has a 20.2% of students identify as MLEs in their school system, whereas we have, for example, on the other end of the spectrum, we have West Virginia with 0.8% who are identified as MLEs. So we have this unbalance when it comes to MLE populations throughout the states. And this means that, for example, states like West Virginia that traditionally has not received a lot of MLEs into their school systems may not have an infrastructure for the arriving population.
What about languages? Of course, Spanish is the most common language of MLE students, but I assume there's a lot more, right?
Yes. The U.S. is, without any doubt, a very multilingual country. And when we have the MLE population, especially the migrant population in schools, I have the statistics here that Spanish is the most commonly spoken language in the U.S. after English. And the MLE population speaks Spanish as approximately 4 million students of the MLE population, which is 76.4%, speak Spanish as a native language or as a home language. But we also have, of course, many more languages like Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese, Haitian Creole. We have states like Hawaii, for example, where Spanish is not even the leading language or the most spoken language from the MLE population. We have Tagalog and Ilocano as the leading languages in Hawaii. So really, we have a lot of diversity in the U.S. and within the MLE population as well.
That sounds extremely complex.
It's complex and it's interesting, and for schools, this is also something that we have to remember, that the MLE population is never the same. So some years we might have more Spanish speakers, but some years we might have more French speakers, for example.
So it's continuously changing.
Always.
If you were to make some strong points that are important to bring success for the MLE students, what would that be?
3 points that I would like to highlight that I think are essential for a successful MLE education. The first one is bringing the community and collaborating with the community, going into the community and working with the community. That means community organizations, institutions that are in the community, bringing them into the education of MLEs. The second point is engaging families. There will be no success with English learners if we don't have families engaged and working with families. So this idea of bringing home and schools together, right? So that's how we create a successful program for MLEs. And the third one, and it's becoming more increasingly important, is in bringing educational technology into school spaces. Educational technology in general, as we know, we're in the 21st century, and I see this with my students. I used to see this with myself as a language learner. Technology is essential wherever you go. And if we really want to prepare MLEs for the world, not only in schools, but outside of schools, we need to bring technology into the classroom so they can become technologically savvy, technological literate individuals. And that's one of the essential, I would say, needs right now for education.
Let me add, I believe, something really important. Because as an outsider, the way that US school system is engaging families and whole communities, basically everyone who can support students, is completely different than what we have in Europe or other continents. I think that this makes things even harder for MLEs and their families because they are not aware of how the system is different.
Yes, and that's one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, for MLEs and their families. Sometimes when they arrive into the school system doesn't have the infrastructure, they do not have the resources in their languages to be able to explain to them, look, this is what we have available for you in schools, in the community. These are when it comes to legal responsibilities from the school system, this is what we can do for you and your child. This is what we have to do. This is what you're entitled to. So the language is always an issue, language barriers. But yes, that's definitely something that in the US, MLEs and their families, they do encounter that challenge quite often.
We will definitely come back to that topic in the next episodes. But right now, we see that there are different approaches. And you said that there are schools that do bare minimum to meet the requirements and nothing beyond that. Why do you think that's happening?
At the end of the day, it goes back to resources. It goes back to funding. Funding is a big issue for education, especially in the US. Is very, very important. So when we look at how some school districts are supporting MLEs and the programs that they have, it goes back to funding opportunities, resources, and also a little bit of their willingness of whether or not they want to be able to support MLEs to the full capacity.
We have a lot of examples of schools that are willing to help, but they don't have funds to do it.
Yes, and funding is a problem because states receive funding depending on the number of MLEs that they have. But yes, funding is always a challenge.
And you mentioned about the technology and how it's important in the development of the students.
Yes.
But what about the knowledge of educators and administrators around the technology?
It also varies significantly. So for example, we have school systems that are very prepared for the 21st century. They have a lot of technology. Teachers receive professional development on an ongoing basis when it comes to being technologically savvy or technologically literate, because teachers have to be technologically savvy and literate to be able to teach students. But then we have other schools, like my schools, for example, I taught, and I can think of, for example, when I taught in one primary school, and then I also taught in a high school, for example, and we had zero technology. So I think it was a disservice to my students and to me also, the teacher. And we didn't get a lot of teachers, we didn't receive a lot of professional development about technology. So we were not the most literate when it came to technology as well.
There's still a lot to do in that area.
A lot of work to do for teachers and students, yes.
You mentioned that there's a lot of languages in the US schools. I assume this can be very hard for schools to deal with that and support all those languages.
Yes, and multilingualism, multiculturalism is fantastic. And it's wonderful for teachers, for students, but it can be a challenge for teachers, specifically for schools, if you do not have the resources to support all of the languages and all of the cultures that are welcome into schools. For example, in my experience, Spanish, as we said, there are a lot of resources usually for Spanish, but for other languages, and students and communities who speak other languages sometimes are kind of left out of the conversation, and there is no translation services. For example, for Urdu, I remember it's quite difficult.
So it's like a chain reaction. We don't have funds. We are not aware of some of the technology that already exists and can help. And in the end, we find ourselves overwhelmed with the challenge that is in front of us.
Most of my students, they either spoke Spanish or Portuguese, but sometimes I had students who spoke French or spoke Vietnamese or other languages, Urdu, Arabic, and I didn't have any resources for them. And I felt overwhelmed, frustrated, helpless, because I didn't have funding from anyone. I didn't have any resources. And then how do I get to communicate with the parents, with the students? How can I help them?
And there is also the other part of the situation, migrant families. It may be very difficult to engage them.
Yes, and I hope that will be a motivator for more funding, especially for the education of MLEs, is the fact that families are also part of the educational system. We have to talk to families. We have to be able to engage them, to give them education about this is the education that your child is going to receive. So they have to be literate in what's happening in schools, but we need funding for that. We need resources. We need translation for that as well.
I have one more I believe, the most important question. Why should the US school system invest in education of the MLEs?
Well, when we think about investing in MLEs and their families, when you're investing in their education, you're also investing in society. So there is research out there that points at how migrant families and MLEs, specifically multilingual learners of English, when they achieve a higher educational outcome and they become more successful as learners, they become more successful as professionals. They also bring into the community their languages, their cultures, their diversity. And this is why the US has a very solid, very strong multilingual workforce because of the migrant families. Also, we see, of course, we call it the American dream, or, many people call it different things, but that's also actually a reality. It also happened because of migrant families. Migrant families come to the US, they work very hard, they bring their entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what makes the US economy quite sturdy, quite solid today.
According to the latest statistics, almost 25% of new businesses are started by immigrants from the first or the second generation. So it seems like investing money and effort
Yes.
in teaching multilingual learners of English will pay out in the future.
I see it as an investment for the country itself. So if you're investing in your students, whether they're MLEs or no, but specifically we're talking about the MLE population, but students in general, all students, the country should be investing in students to be able to improve the country. The MLEs, what they bring, again, it's their entrepreneurial spirit, their multilingualism, their multicultural background, and that's what enriches the US as well. So, and that statistic is fantastic, 25.2, that's quite significant.
You mentioned the cultural input of multilingual learners of English into the music, film industry.
Consider highly recognized awards. We can see a lot of migrants being recognized as Americans. And that's also what they bring with them, of course, their intellect, their ingenuity, and all of that is part of the migrant population, who are now Americans. So that's definitely something else that enriches the US.
It's fair to say that educating MLEs and, of course, monolingual students as well will make the society less unequal.
Yes, that's very fair to say. Equality at the end of the day is making sure that everyone has the same opportunities. So when we talk about MLE education or education for multilingual learners of English and their families, of course, we talk about them having the same opportunities to be successful. And that would be the definition of equality in society.
I believe that gives us a good background for the further discussion.
Yes.
In the next episodes, we will focus on different perspectives. I want to thank you for our conversation. It's been a pleasure. For the audience, please stay tuned to see the main takeaways from our discussion, and see you in the next episode.